Good afternoon, everybody. Members of Planning and Development Committee on the date of March 25th. Our first item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes? No? Oh, yes. Oh, my apologies. We have a delegation request for item 6.2 regarding development of Brampton's age-friendly strategy, and that's Sylvia Roberts. And there's Sylvia Menezes-Roberts. Okay. And we have the addition of the Brampton Heritage Board minutes, item 8.2. Any further additions? No. Can I get a mover of the changes? Moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Do any members have any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? No. Consent, we have items 7.2, 7.3, and 8.1 in consent. Are there any changes? Councillor Plushie? You would like to move 8.2 into consent? Please. Okay. So moved by any more further changes? No? So, yes.
I would like to discuss the minutes of the Brampton Heritage Board. I would not like to move 8.2. Yes.
Okay, so I'll leave the consent agenda as is. So move the consent agenda as is. Moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. So we go to 5 delegations, staff presentations. Is the delegation first? Oh, because we're
Through you,
moving
Mr. Chair, the delegation would be after the presentation 6.2, but we have a staff presentation 6.1 first on sustainability performance of new development.
So would you like to reverse it? Vary the order?
That's the will of committee.
Okay, is that fine with staff? To vary the order? Okay, so we'll vary the order. This way it allows our delegation. So we will go to item 6.2, see item 7.1, Development of Brampton's Age-Friendly Strategy.
Okay, good afternoon, members of committee. As mentioned, my name is Daniela Balasal, policy planner with the Planning Department, and I am delighted to be before you today to provide an update on Brampton's age-friendly initiative. In terms of defining an age-friendly community, according to the World Health Organization, an age-friendly community is one that encourages active aging by optimizing opportunities for health, as well as opportunities for participation and security in order to enhance quality of life. So simply put, age-friendly communities are those that support aging in place in a holistic manner. The city has retained WSP to develop its age-friendly strategy, and the strategy would be used to guide plans as well as programs and operations within various municipal departments. And it will also be used to improve service delivery and to address any service gaps that exist. So through the framework for developing an age-friendly community, which has been formed by the World Health Organization, or WHO, that framework has also been tailored to Ontario by the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. And the ministry has identified 4 stages to developing a strategy. And they've also prepared a guide entitled Finding the Right Fit, which provides guidance to municipalities in Ontario. So similar to that framework, the WHO has developed a designation process. So the city is actively pursuing that designation, allowing us to obtain full membership into the global network of age-friendly communities. And that aligns us with other municipalities also committed to continuous improvements. So it is anticipated that by the end of second quarter, the city would have satisfied 3 of the 4 steps in being designated an age-friendly community. So the city's work to date includes signing a commitment letter by council which occurred in November of 2016. We've also now formed our age-friendly advisory committee, which has been very active and supports the city's age-friendly initiatives. We have also prepared 2 background reports. So the first is a baseline assessment report, which was finalized in September of last year, followed by a community engagement and findings report, and that was finalized earlier this month. And that just presents all of the findings from the various engagement activities that we've done to date. It's also worth mentioning that the city has actively pursued funding opportunities. So we also applied for a seniors community grant, though we were unsuccessful, but we continue to be mindful of those opportunities. So there are 8 community dimensions or focus areas established by WHO for achieving age-friendly objectives. So some of them speak to the physical environment, such as housing, transportation, outdoor spaces, and trails, while others speak to the social environment. So that deals with things such as social isolation, respect, health services, as well as employment opportunities for folks of all ages. And of course, these focus areas or age-friendly domains interconnect. So you can see before you, this is the project logo. It's a flower icon, and that really builds on the city's identity as being a flower city. And we utilize this logo throughout the project to really remind us to consider what it means to apply an age-friendly lens to community development and as well as decision making. And part of our work we're mindful of the fact that it also touches on hard as well as soft infrastructure. And soft, of course, speaks to the delivery of services and really looking at applying an age-friendly perspective to customer service. Okay. So there has been significant public and community engagement that has occurred. The first primary event was a visioning session, which was held with the members of our age-friendly committee, and that occurred in August of last year. As well, we undertook a community audit where we went out into various neighborhoods to assess how age-friendly or accessible those communities are. So you can see here on this slide, there was an accessible washroom that was temporarily put up in the downtown core in Garden Square to support summer events. We also looked at various commercial plazas throughout Brampton and visited places of worship, such as a Gurdwara, to gauge the accessibility and age-friendliness of those facilities. And as part of the audit, we utilized various mobility aids. So staff had used a walker, as well as goggles to kind of get the sense of what it is, what the feeling is to have a visual impairment or physical impairment. Additional outreach included going out to the farmers market during the summer. We went out to Seniors Council several times, participated in the Transit Customer Service Appreciation event, and held focus group sessions with key stakeholders. A session was also held with Indus Community Services, and that allowed us to hear directly from members of the South Asian community. And the intent there was to ensure that the strategy really caters to the various needs of our community, given that we are a diverse community, a diverse city. There were also 3 public workshops held in different parts throughout the city, in different community centers, such as Gore Meadows, Mount Pleasant, and Chimpuzi Park. And we also developed a communication strategy as well, or a communication plan. And as part of that, we developed a dedicated phone line to allow residents to call in if they prefer to get information by speaking to someone as opposed to going online to obtain information. So these are just some of the photos from the public workshops which were held at the community centers. In addition to all that engagement, we also conducted a resident survey that was made available for 3 weeks, both online and hard copies that were made available in various public facilities. And the survey was translated into several languages to allow folks who were experiencing language barriers an opportunity to feed into the process. So we received a total of 350 responses, so quite successful. Okay. Next, I would like to share with the committee a video that captures some of our recent engagement efforts. If you can kindly just turn your attention to the screen before you. footage from our first ever age-friendly forum, which was held in January at Flower City. It was a free event made open to all residents of Brampton. There were about 200 attendees, including, of course, elected officials, members of council, as well as various exhibitor booths. There were 20 booths set up, and that provided residents an opportunity to learn about the various services that the city offers. So, for instance, Peel Public Works had a booth that provided information on the snow removal rebate program that is made available to seniors as well as residents with disabilities who have issues with snow removal during the summer months. And as well, Mayor Brown provided welcome remarks. So that's just some photos of the booths that we had during the forum. And the event was supported by Sheridan College, so there was a team of about 16 students who came and volunteered to ensure that the day was a success. And the keynote presentation was delivered by Gil Penalosa of 880 Cities. And he spoke on the idea of planning for those who are 8 as well as those who are 80 to ensure that we are undertaking an inclusive approach to community design. And he really encouraged us to move away from the way that planning has traditionally been done, and also encouraged us to achieve some of those quick wins as we move forward with our age-friendly initiative. And the next 2 slides just show some of the feedback that we received, broken down by domain through our engagement work. So I'm now happy to say that we are in the last phase of developing the age-friendly strategy. It's anticipated that the document will come forward for Council's adoption in June. And once that occurs, we will begin to focus on implementation, so looking at the action items that have been put forward and associating them with timelines. So identifying both short, medium-term, as well as long-term goals. And as part of that, we will also develop metrics or KPIs for monitoring how successful the implementation of the plan is. Okay. And with that brings my presentation to a close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of committee, before I see Councillor Woolens.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Danielle. That was very good. Well done. You've been very instrumental in keeping this and getting this going, and did a lot of work with you and your staff and those around the age-friendly committee. Just one thing we have to keep in mind is when working with other levels of government, we got to make sure that they're aware of it, because when we applied for that grant, I thought that grant was very well written by some of the members that were there. I thought we had an excellent chance of getting some funding for it, and as it turned out, we didn't. When I approached an MPP at the time, they said that we have to make them aware when we're applying for grants. Well, if they're aware that these grants are coming, they should be making us aware of it, not the other way around. But anyway, we've sort of a lesson learned there on that one. But other than that, good work on this, and I look forward to seeing the final report.
Thank you, Councillor Woolens. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is an excellent report, and the statistics and the data that you've collected is so comprehensive. It's awesome to read through. With regards to the housing component, we know it's hard to encourage people to develop and for people to expand in those areas. You know, if people don't feel comfortable or see the benefit of low-income housing or affordable housing in the community. So how does this plan to address the stigma?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think a lot of the housing work will primarily be deferred to the affordable housing strategy. So in terms of removing stigma associated with affordable housing initiatives and developments, we're working quite closely with the region of Peel. So they recently created their strategic housing committee, and we also we recently had an affordable housing committee meeting, our ad hoc committee, which allows for full discussion on addressing those issues with all of our housing partners.
Is it possible to even start working with some mental health organizations that are quite connected to individuals who are accessing affordable housing, and some of the ways that they may suggest on how to further address the stigma, or is that a part of the plans as well with the region?
Okay. Yes, I definitely think through you, Mr. Chair, there are definitely opportunities to work with our community partners. I think that's something that we could give special attention to as we move forward with that work. We initially did have members or representatives on our Affordable Housing Committee who also represent the shelter, the transitional housing providers. So we can definitely go back and continue that conversation in a deliberate way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. As I see no questions, thank you very much. Now, at this time, I'd like to invite the delegation by Sylvia Menezes-Roberts.
Hello, I'm Sylvia. I'm a resident of Ward 3. First off, I wanted to thank Ms. Bolasol and WSP. I went to the event at the Chinguzi Park ski lodge, or ski chalet, I think it is. And then I also went to the age-friendly event with Gil Penalosa of 8 and 80, and I thought they were both well done. In 2017, I spent much of my year caring for my grandparents, so this is actually this kind of work is actually very personally important to me. So I just wanted to make sure that council was aware. So I know in some efforts the city has tried to include youth, but it's the World Health Organization, Peel Region, the province, all of that stuff is designed specifically for seniors. And so it's been difficult for planning staff to fit in youth into it, just because it's specifically focused at seniors. And the planning literature also is all focused just at seniors and does not meaningfully feature participation stuff for how to include them. So it's trying to include them. If you have to do both of them, staff has to either pick one or the other, or both are going to be mediocre at best. And they picked seniors, which is completely understandable because that is what the focus of the provincial guidelines and the region are for. One of the things I noticed in the baseline report is, so normally benchmarking is a really useful tool, but because this deals with social issues and how different Brampton's demographics are from, I honestly can't find a city with comparable demographics in terms of size and then household structure. So the ability for benchmarking tools becomes an issue. And so for most cities, this works great. And even for most city planning uses, it works great. But it's on certain issues, it just doesn't work. So questions like on the survey are like, do you rent or own your current home? In the vast majority of cities, in the vast majority of use cases, this would work very well. But in Brampton, we also have there's a lot of households that are nuclear families, and so you have extended families and joint families. So it's a case of if your family lives with your brother's family and your brother's family owns the home and you pay money to the household budget and that pays for stuff, are you renting it from them or do you own the home? It's cases like that where the data just does not fit very well. One of the issues brought up at a previous council meeting was actually the issue of elder abuse. It wasn't addressed in the report, and part of the issue is that in Brampton, so my family moved to Brampton in the 70s, and there was systemic racism against South Asians, and if you look at the media, it's been pretty clear that there has been continued hostility towards South Asians simply existing. See the incident where a lady showed up and heckled Jagmeet Singh about Sharia law. So to some people, they found the video amusing, but to South Asians, it's a very clear reminder that there's a lot of people in Canada that see our presence as simply unwelcome. And part of some of the things this has resulted in, so issues like elder abuse, they don't get talked about because the community is afraid if they talk about anything bad that is going on, that someone is going to use it against them. And so it was not really brought up with the city. And so it may be beneficial to have members of the staff who are of that demographic who will be considered as trusted and not outsiders who might be perceived as potentially to use issues against them that may be more beneficial for aiding the population. Sorry, one of these things is on the housing strategy. The senior housing strategy is actually separate from the age-friendly strategy because that's part of the housing strategy, not seniors. So for certain things like transportation, I don't know if council is aware, some of you sit at regional council, some don't. Certain issues like paratransit, what we will call trans help, the cost to the city is at $32 net per ride, whereas things like Brampton Transit are $2 per ride. And I wanted to make sure council was aware that if you improve transit, because with trans help, you have to schedule it, and so it produces lots of limitations. If you work towards making things like transit accessible to seniors, and they can take Brampton Transit instead, you're talking about a subsidy of $2 instead of $32. So some of these items can actually result in substantial savings. I know that this is a regional thing, but in the end, both come out of the property tax base, and they're both on our property tax bill, so those things should be considered.
Sylvia,
Yeah.
we've gone beyond 5 minutes.
That was the end of my delegation.
Okay.
Sorry.
So were there any, that was it then? No questions or anything?
Will the planning department advise city council to work to improve transit on value for money grounds? So there are savings to be found by improving transit. And then what steps is the planning department taking to ensure a variety of housing types are available across the city, including addressing problems in zoning that result in small units desired by units failing to pencil out? This is an issue in Wards 4, where my grandmother was not able to move out to somewhere because there simply was not supply existing. Also, the poor shape of older multifamily units that's discussed in there is repeatedly brought up in consultation, and I was wondering if the planning department was going to talk with the city about adjusting things like the multifamily rate. The new and the old multifamily have different rates, and the older buildings are under a much higher rate, that the city portion is 70% higher than the regular residential rate. And so by adjusting that downwards, you could talk with the building owners and ensure that there's money to ensure these buildings are safe for residents, because a lot of these buildings do have older residents who are living there because there's no alternative place, and they're crumbling because there is no money to fix them.
Does staff want to make any comments, or, and also if you have a copy, if you can share that with staff.
I did provide a copy.
Okay, great.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So we do, I guess there are a couple of questions to answer there. We do have a housing strategy a committee working right now towards addressing some of these issues. One thing that was brought up was the seniors housing strategy, and I know it was only discussed briefly at our meeting last week with the housing committee, only because of time constraints. But we have gone through the exercise of identifying potential locations across the city for additional seniors housing. And that discussion will continue in terms of improving availability in that regard. On the housing affordability front in general, we are having some very progressive discussions with the region and potentially piloting a program maybe even this year with the developer to test the waters on a new approval process for high-rise residential that includes below market rentals. So you'll see that discussion come up a little bit, likely even tomorrow in the DC discussion. I think some of the builders that were present at the committee meeting last week, raised interest in coming to the workshop tomorrow to speak about DCs in relation to affordable housing. So I can expect that you'll see some discussion come up tomorrow on that. With respect to the actual the upkeep of that affordable housing, I don't know that I'm prepared to really speak to that too much at this point in time. I know that would be something that we would have to coordinate with our property standards division about and see what efforts are currently in place and what can be done. But at this point in time, I don't think I would be the correct person to speak to that.
Mm-hmm. And then, so the housing thing that was done and isn't technically part of this. It identified two major locations, one of which is in wards 3 and 4 as having a high cluster of amenities. Do you know where I think it's Kennedy and Dean is? That's actually identified as an excellent amenity location, which is true. There's one catch. The intersection is 500 meters from the nearest crosswalk, and when I drive along there, I actually frequently see seniors crossing the street because it's effectively almost physically impossible for them to walk an entire kilometer in order to cross the road. And so the other spot was Torbram and Central Park, and for both of these cases, it's right at the boundary between a residential and a commercial area, and this exists because the historic model of planning in the city has been focused around segregating things. So you have this block is just residential and there's not really commercial. And so the high amenity areas are right at the boundaries where there's high volumes of traffic at high speeds and frequently truck traffic that is physically unsafe for seniors.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Williams has a question of the delegation. Yes, Councilor Williams.
Actually, I was going to suggest we receive the delegation and bring the report 7.1 forward. And I want to just comment on the report briefly.
Yes. Okay. And we'll move up to item 7.1.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just quickly to Daniela, there was some talk about that the report doesn't really speak to the youth, but I believe that on our age friendly we have 4 members of the youth on there, and I think we were pretty clear in our mandate that we want to integrate the youth with the seniors, or as people age. I think will that be coming in the final report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you are correct. There is youth representation on the committee. We currently have 3 members who are youth, as well as representation from, I believe it's the Brampton Multicultural Youth Council. So through that, we've been able to hear various needs that the youth have. However, there was a motion put forward regarding youth council, so we are deferring that conversation. It's not being brought forward as part of this report, but we hope to report back to council with some recommendations, staff recommendations, by the end of second quarter.
Great, thanks, and I'd be happy to move the report if there's no other speakers.
Okay, thank you. So, as I see no speakers, Councilor Williams will be receiving staff presentation, moving the staff presentation, the report, and the delegation. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Item 6.1, come on down.
If I can get this presentation going. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilor, for inviting me to present to you today on the city's sustainable community guidelines and metrics. Michael Hoy from the Environment and Engineering Division. The purpose of the presentation is sort of to provide a quick overview of the city's strategic sustainable plans and the sustainable community program for new development, and then overview of some next steps that staff will be taking over the next year. The city has a pretty robust sustainability framework represented in the 2040 vision, our official plan, our Grow Green environmental master plan, and all these sort of studies have really focused in and helped influence the development of our sustainable community guidelines and our metrics. And those metrics and sustainable community guidelines also feed back up into the redevelopment and revisions of these plans as well. Our sustainable community program has 2 phases. The first phase was completed in 2014, and it was a series of guidelines for development to help guide development going forward for secondary plans, block plans, plans, subdivisions, and site plans. And they relate to, or they are aligned with the Peel's Healthy Development Index. That was approved in 2014 by Council. Those guidelines were broken down into 4 key framework, built environment, so where we place our buildings, how we develop our homes, where we put our amenities, where we put our commercial blocks, mobility, how we connect community with active transportation, transit, how we design our roads, natural environment, how do we protect our rivers, valleys, and wetlands, and restore them, And in green infrastructure and buildings is how we try to conserve water, energy, and those kind of things. This is an example of one guideline within it. We have over 300 guidelines within that document. The guidelines are great. They help sort of direct development, but there are no real teeth to guidelines, so developers can review them, but they don't necessarily have to adhere to them. So in 2014, staff from Richmond Hill and Vaughan and C. Brampton undertook a project to quantify, see if we could quantify the sustainability performance of new development. So we took our guidelines as a base and we chose 50 sustainability metrics that we thought reflect what a community would look like if it was sustainable, or what a building would look like if it was sustainable. And through that process, we developed 3 performance tiers, mandatory. So those are the things we require as a city right now. Our standards are sort of different drawings we use to evaluate development. Then recommended minimum, there's things things will go better than what we require as law or as best practice. And the aspirational are the best in class. That would be like a LEED gold platinum building. And then we developed thresholds. So various thresholds, bronze, silver, and gold. We took this approach where we gave developers a whole series of metrics, and we allowed them to choose the metrics that best fit their application and their site, and not necessarily prescribe certain metrics needed to be changed. So this sort of framework that we used was sort of to try to give flexibility to the development industry, and that's what we heard throughout our consultation process. So this is an example of one metric. We have 53, I think, metrics in total. So the mandatory, as I said, has no point attached. So this is required as a development, through development approvals. So then if you are a developer and you want to go above and beyond what requires compensation for removal of tree, we'll give you 2 points. If you try to protect more trees within your development, you get 3 points plus the 2 points for the achieving the minimum standard. So that's sort of how we go. We've built an online tool that's filled out by developers, so it's really quick and easy. It usually takes half hour. You can complete your application, and then you come up with a score. It calculates the score automatically. In 2015, council approved these thresholds with the caveat that we were going to encourage development to achieve these metrics. So the bronze is what we said is the minimum required, but we didn't have any teeth to that. In 2018, June, council approved that all applications submitted to the city will achieve at minimum the bronze threshold. So all site plans, draft plans, and block plans will have to achieve this minimum score. So staff started implementing that in August of this last year, 2018. So it's an example of a high-scoring community, Mount Pleasant. It was used as one of our baselines to develop thresholds. So you can see here, this scores a silver, without ever achieving any of the energy and water conservation metrics that we have. The city can't really implement a higher standard, higher than the building code standard, so we really have we have no ability really to incentivize that. But however, they were still able to achieve our silver threshold through better community design, walkable communities, more density, nodes where commercial areas are, and in the natural heritage system, and a lot of the improvements there. So we're asking to get these scores. It's not that onerous on the development, and they reach these thresholds. So the submission requirements, so as I told you, it's an online tool. So the developer fills out that application online. They print out that score. They submit that score to the city. They also submit a summary of that score. It's about a 2 or 3 page document that sort of outlines where in the component studies, like an EIS or traffic study, that metric can be verified by staff. So they're always going to be submitting component studies. We just want them to highlight where in that study we can verify those scores. So it's a relatively easy process to abide to and to do. Our role as staff is to help development get through the development process and try to get them to that bronze at minimum, and if possible, get them to the silver or gold. And then we also, planning staff present the scores, the initial scores in their information reports, and then the final score in their recommendation reports. And then council, we review those reports and see if they are meeting your objectives. So the benefits, these sustainable guidelines really articulate all the direction we've had from the region, from the province, and from the federal government. Their hope is that we're going to be working in building better walkable mixed-use communities, diverse housing units, enhanced tree canopy, clean water, energy conservation, but also providing a more clear and concise and efficient development review process, because now we're telling developers what we want and what kind of community we're trying to achieve. And also we make better decisions because we know, we quantify what we think the developments are achieving. So we've been monitoring this for the last 5 years of implementation. We started off relatively poor. So out of, we were achieving 35%, we're not meeting our minimum, 44 as in 2016. It's gone down to 24 in 2018. However, when we approved the mandatory that they had to meet our minimum thresholds, our compliance went up to 86%. So in 2018, it was 76%. And since that implementation of council's direction, we're up to 86%. So we're moving forward, and it did help with the quality of the submissions we were receiving. So the next step. So one of our things we'll probably be delivering in council report soon is this one-page snapshot of council for sustainability score. So it'll be one page that shows exactly what the score is, and on the back of that page it will show the metrics that's been achieved by that development. And just a quick summary right now, the sustainability score is about 20 pages, and we don't include it with development reports. So this is an easy way to really highlight what the scores are. We're also working with our partners again, Richmond Hill and Vaughan, to update some of the metrics to relate to climate change, but we're also looking at how we can update to some of the other strategies we're doing, active transportation and age-friendly. And we're also looking at updating some standards for our sustainability metrics for urban centers. Any development really within downtown Brampton or some of our urban areas, they're going to achieve that RON score before they even put anything. So it's relatively easy if you're in an urban area to achieve the bronze. So looking at how we can maybe make urban center development a little higher. And then look at an incentive program, how we can sort of incentivize applications to get to the gold level. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael, thanks for the report. I'd like to try and better understand one of the examples here in Mount Pleasant was, and I'm just trying to find it here, the score that was given for water and energy. And although it may, in appearance here, it scores relatively high in a silver, not a gold, but with the lack of energy numbers, the lack of water numbers, the kind of the work that had gone into that development in terms of some of the trees that were planted in the concrete and the water system that was to catch and reuse. I'd kind of like to understand how we measure or what we need to see to get that score that we'd like to have in the city.
Well, through you, Chair, we as a municipality, we have a hard time. So we have a hard time getting energy and water conservation higher than the building code. The building code in Ontario is relatively progressive. It's probably one of the leading building codes in North America. So it's hard to go above that and get development to do that. So the individual homes is looking at water conservation, so putting in taps that conserve water. Energy is sort of higher, so I think it's 15% above building code would be that would have got at least easily gold there. But we have no ability to do that, and it's an expensive upgrade for developers. So that's where I think the incentives that we were looking at could help.
So it's more along the lines of what the developers are putting into the homes.
Yes.
to try and conserve. Do we, trying to understand this a little bit better, from a big developer's point of view, I guess they would have a better understanding, a better relationship with staff because they're always working together. So they'd understand more of what staff and the city of Brampton want to see in that development. But speaking on some of the smaller ones, and in particular maybe some of the smaller ones that have gone through, for example, the Royal Cliff application, Conestoga and Sandwood, it's been some 37 years by the time that came around. do we want to see them do more? Absolutely. Are they willing to do more? Probably not, because of all the, unfortunately, cost runs development, and that's why the developers are in the business that they're in. So how do we then say to, some of the smaller players that you need to add this to your development, of course, increasing the cost of housing, which we're trying not to do, but how do we work with them, and how do we get them to understand, some more of the benefits and working through this? I know you said it's a half-hour process online, but really it's not. It's going further along and working with staff and actually bringing the application forward to council. Right.
Through you, Chair, do you want to?
And through you, Chair, just to provide some response, and perhaps if Michael wants to supplement a little bit, but with the program that we have in place currently, with it being a requirement, whereas it wasn't before, that's a large part to really driving the dialogue with all the developers through to them understanding really what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. So when the most recent Royal Cliff application came in, and obviously not the prior applications that we had worked with them on, when that first came in, it wasn't part of, there wasn't a requirement for the minimum threshold from a point standpoint. It wasn't applied. We didn't have that mandate at that point in time. I can't recall how the community scored really then, but really now it is that we have the program in place. We have a minimum mandatory requirement. This is part of every dialogue, every conversation that we're having with developers as we go forward. With every application, we have our pre-consultation applications followed by then our full applications received. But right from the get-go, right from that pre-consultation stage, we're talking about exactly this, and the fact that they have to meet the minimum and how they would do that, and then trying to encourage them to score better by way of implementing certain things as well. So now it is that we have the tool by way of Michael's group and council. It is part of every conversation we're having.
And are you able to, not only, you don't want to just hand the document over to say, okay, you need to figure something out, but by example, some of the things that we may be able to suggest. Are we having that kind of relationship? Are we having that kind of dialogue?
Through you, Chair, most definitely. So staff is really trying to understand from them at those early stages, how they foresee really satisfying the scores, and really what they are potentially willing to do over and beyond that. So yes, we're having all that conversation. Really over and beyond that, what we've been discussing as of late, just more internally, is like how we motivate them now even further. And so there's been some discussion about us utilizing our home buyers information maps. So maps that really go up in sales offices to really inform community members, trying to inform them as they're trying to decide if they're going to make a purchase on that particular product or not. For us to utilize that home buyers map to state how it is the developer has reached a certain score, or really what score they've achieved, bronze versus silver, and for us to have some descriptors there so that they're understanding it and understanding that what they're thinking about buying into is, good or great or amazing. This is some additional steps that we can take to further drive the outcome that we want. So.
Through you, Chair, also, we also have a documented tool online that we work with developers to say, if you want to go above this metric, here's what you can do, and these are the things that we would accept as a city to achieve that goal, or that metric. So we do have a lot of dialogue going back and forth.
One of the good things that I find is builders are always kind of competing with each other to one up. A lot of builders are doing that, and that works in favor of the city, I think, to bring the best product to market. With the we had a recent delegation for Institute for Sustainability. Michael, we didn't really ask you your thoughts on that matter, nor when that kind of was coming back. Have you been able to talk to the Langs, and I'm sure you wrote the book on sustainability and 2040 vision, I think. Any comments on that?
I think the Institute, we've done some research on through you, Chair. So we've done some research on the Institute now, what is going forward. We think there's it has to be a focused kind of institute and focused on some particular issues that the city's not necessarily focused on. But I don't think it should be a blanket institute that just, it interferes with a lot of other things that we're doing, or the conservation authorities are doing, the region appeal is doing. So I think it's really important to really figure out what that institute can fill and what gap it can fill within sustainability development in Brampton.
Okay, my last question through you, Mr. Chair. The region is putting, no, it's actually not the region, so it's a development company building down in the Jim Tovey Lakeview development, and they're doing a trip, they're going on a trip out to Sweden for urban design, sustainable urban design. Have you had an opportunity to look at what they're doing, or is anybody in the city of Brampton attending that trip?
Through you, Chair. No, I'm not attending that trip, but we did go to Copenhagen and we did see development beyond what we can widely dream here. They are leading edge, the greenest city in the world. And we did learn a lot from that project. We did develop a lunch and learn with staff to sort of go over the lessons we've learned. And then there's a 2-day workshop coming up focused on the Bramalea area and how we can redevelop and how we can bring the lessons learned from the Norwegians and how they can help us develop Bramalea in a different way. So yeah, we've done those kind of missions and learned from them, and they're coming back to talk to us to see how they can help us start achieving some of those.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good news. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Palacio. Councilor Santos.
Thanks for and through you, Chair, thanks for the presentation, Michael. Just a couple of questions. The sustainability score, I understand that it is for forward-looking for future development, correct? I'm wondering when the score is finalized, whether or not we could also use that tool to evaluate and analyze previous developments.
Through you, Chair. So I think you guys received a presentation on the nurture neighborhoods last week or 2 weeks ago. So part of that process was they used the tool to evaluate the neighborhoods. And we've used that tool to evaluate. So we do a SNAP program, which is looking at existing neighborhoods. We use that tool as well to evaluate what the score would be and then what kind of interventions we can do. So we are using it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy that that's happening. And then I'm making just an assumption here that density development and intensification helps a sustainability score.
Through you, Chair, no.
It doesn't.
So it's about right density in the right
Okay.
place, but it would be, I think the density question we have is, are you adhering to the city's policy for that area? And then then how do you spread, then another question is the density centered along the main spine of the community? And then is there mixed use within the center of the community? It doesn't say it's gotta be higher or lower, it just says if you have density, put more of the density in certain locations. But again, only to what the city policies are within the secondary plan, official plan. So we're not saying you can get, because that would get us into troubles, right?
Yeah.
So we keep to where our policies are.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Santos. Sorry, my apologies, is Councilor Williams, I believe? Yes.
Thank you, through you, Chair.
Yeah, sorry.
On slide 6.18, it says the rec minimum proposed for removal, enhanced compensation is provided based on basal area. When we're talking about compensation, is that like replanting trees in these areas, or trying to make sure that there is the same type of balance? Can you explain that a bit more to me, please?
Through you, Chair. So, so every development comes in, and there will be impacts on existing trees on that property. So we ask them to do an evaluation of those trees. In 2014 or 2010, we had so every tree that you were proposing to remove, you had to compensate at a 1-to-1 ratio. In 2014, we upped that ratio to 3-to-1, and then in 2018, we upped that to a sliding scale that went from 1-to-1 to 6-to-1. So that's the mandatory. So the mandatory is that sliding scale of 1-to-1 to 6-to-1 for trees that are over 50 centimeters wide. And then either is planted on this property or on the site, if it's possible, because it has to go above and beyond what we would plant in a tree, or in a street, or in a park. So we have standards for park trees, we have standard for street trees, standard for buffer, standard for restoration and natural. So a lot of these standards are there, so it's very hard sometimes for them to plant within an existing community, or within a new community. So we also developed a cash and lieu process where we'll take cash instead of those trees to be compensated for, and then use that money to then start tree planting. So this is all in response to the Million Tree program, that came under the vision, trying to figure out where we got to compensate properly for these trees, but then also know where we can plant them. So that, and then if you want to go over that minimum, that mandatory, that's the mandatory. So if you want to go over the minimum, basal areas, you take all the trees and you add them all up, and it's this big of a tree. It's a TRCA sort of standard, so it's much higher than ours, but it's pushing the envelope of compensation. And then the aspirational is, rarely do we get 75% of trees ever protected on the site. Sometimes we get maybe 10 or 20%, but we'll never get 75. So just over and above what we require.
Okay, so we want over and above what we require, and it's making, I like the 6-to-1, which is really great. Now, is it the trees that we're asking them to replace, we're requiring them to replace it with the small size trees, or are we looking for something more of mature tree size that will add to the canopy?
Through you, Chair. So trees are, when you plant trees, it's better to plant, staff have a recommended size, I think it's 70 millimeters.
Okay, 70
That's a
millimeters.
pot. The larger trees, they look great, but they cost a lot of money to keep going. So we have to maintain them really hard for 2 years, watering them. So we try to make them a certain size.
Right, okay,
And that's our CIL is calculated on too as well.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Williams. I believe Councilor Williams was next.
Just thinking, go if he wants.
That's okay, I reversed the order. Councilor Williams, go ahead.
Michael? You're up. Okay, thank you, Michael, for the report. I'm glad Councilor Pelletier brought that question up about the scores, the point structure. Maybe this would give us an opportunity through the SERP. Maybe we should be, somebody else we should be looking at, maybe the manufacturer of the products that are going into some of these homes. Get them online with some of these developers, even though they're online, rather than getting the cheapest one for the development. Maybe they can do something to achieve some of these scores. And I think, I'm glad you brought up the Nordic City Solutions coming up tomorrow, I believe, and Wednesday. Encourage the councillors to come tomorrow night, I believe, at 4 o'clock, is it? 4 till 6 here at the atrium, is it the atrium? To meet the group from the Nordic countries. It's pretty exciting. I'm excited to be part of that. And I think through this Nordic City Solutions, we'll probably find some, and through SERP, our task force that we've created, that I think we'll find some good ways to get our neighborhoods and more sustainable than they are now, and get some of these guys achieving the gold status here. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Councilor Williams. Councilor Singh.
Yeah, I was playing with the idea of how to encourage developers to take on sustainability initiatives, because it's not something we can mandate, is what I'm understanding. So right now we have, I guess, the sustainability scores, which are a snapshot in council reports. Have we considered doing, or has it ever been talked about doing annual sustainability reports on the city, how we're doing, or linking it up with our annual sort of statements as well that we're getting ready? Has there been any talks of doing that? Do municipalities do that, or?
To you, Chair. So we report on our environmental master plan, the Grow Green plan.
Yeah.
So we reported, I think, last June on the 3-year implementation of that. So we're also right now in the planning to report back to you in 2020 with sort of the 5-year performance of that plan, and then also a proposal to refresh the environmental master plan to reflect all the priorities that have been done in the last 3 or 4 years. And also, we had a lot of actions in that first master plan, so maybe pared down to actually real priorities that we want to get to. And then on this program, we do monitoring reports for the city performance measurement website. So on that website, the sustainability metrics are one of the key measurements.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pelletier.
Thank you, Miss Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question, Michael. When is that two-day workshop coming up?
The two-day workshop is tomorrow, so Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay, and where is it?
It's at the Chinguzi Ski Chalet.
Okay.
And then there will be a walking tour of Bramalea City Center.
Can you get an information report to come back to planning at some point?
Through you, sure, yeah, on that workshop?
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
We're in a workshop, and I think it's, anyways, I'd like to try and understand how, we could I thought that we were at a 1 to 10. For every one tree that comes out, 10 had to go, back up. And I thought that was put through in 2014, but I guess I'm wrong. How do we get to that point? How do we, I'd like to know how much money is in that reserve as well. And how are we spending that money to replace trees that were hit and damaged from the ice storm? Or is it, and there seems to be more of I guess we need a little bit more information. Can you come back with some?
Through you, Chair, we have been working on the million tree, sort of how we would respond to that directive. So we have been working with forestry and park staff and landscape architect staff to come up with a comprehensive strategy how we are going to hit 1 million trees within the next 20 years. It's going to be difficult, but we're planting probably 25 to 30,000 trees a year. So we have to get to 50,000 trees, so a year. So we are looking at all strategies. We're looking for all the reserves that we have that we can then utilize. We're coming up with where we can plant in parks. We've upped our street tree planting requirements. We've upped our park land requirements. So we can come back with a comprehensive report to show you all the things that we have done to start getting this there. And that reserve that CIL reserve is starting to build. We never had CIL probably prior to 2016. So the reserve is starting to build, but it's not as where we want it to be.
Okay. So what do you need to get that, and how much time do you need to bring that back to, and I guess it would go to planning?
Through you, Chair. We've been working on it, so the more you give us a deadline, the probably we'll get to you. So we don't have a deadline, so we're just working away at it.
So you'd like a deadline?
Yeah.
Can we get end of summer?
Sure.
Okay. Need that in the motion, Peter?
Should be in a motion if that's the will of committee.
So I'd like to put that in the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I believe maybe Peter.
My apologies, I was searching for some information on the Nordic two-day session, so I didn't. The intent of the motion is to have a report back
On
Million trees?
On the Million Tree.
Million Trees program.
Yeah.
So end of summer, probably beginning or first council meeting of the fall?
Sure.
Okay.
With a little bit of leeway, just in case that planning agenda is stacked.
Yeah.
So a motion moved by Councillor Palashi as articulated by our city clerk. Moved by Councillor Palashi. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. And can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Carried. We go on to item 8.2, Brampton Heritage Board. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those of you who may have had a moment just to look at the minutes of the Heritage Board from last week, there was an item that garnered quite a bit of discussion with respect to the Main Street South area, which is comprised mainly of old heritage value homes, pertaining to an application to subdivide a property to allow for the construction of a new home. The plan went to the Committee of Adjustment. It was recommended by staff to not proceed with the plan, and then the Committee of Adjustment voted in favor of it, and the city had to go to the local planning appeal tribunal, and that case did not meet favorably at the LPAT. And so a discussion ensued about whether or not additional measures need to be looked at to protect the heritage characteristics of the Main Street South district. There have been conversations here at council with respect to designating it as a district, but there were also conversations at the meeting with regards to whether an interim control bylaw would be appropriate while staff look at potential measures to protect the area. So I'd just like to get a sense from staff, and for the benefit of the members here, what staff's thought are on those potential ideas and what kind of direction you may need from council.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think with regards to the councillors' concerns that were raised at the Heritage Board, absolutely. Oh, can I speak? I'll get a little closer here. How's that? The decision from LPAT, I think, was a bit of a surprise in many respects. That we haven't seen very many severances, and certainly not ones that have come forward in a way that don't conform to the secondary plan, which does prohibit those, or at least definitely discourage them. At this point, we're looking for this fall to come forward with Main Street South Conservation, Heritage Conservation District. And, there also aren't that many lots that we'd see be subject to these. So I'm sure there was a lot of discussion at the Heritage Board. This is certainly something we can bring forward a report on for council's consideration if that's the wish of the committee. From our perspective, I think at this point in time, we'd carry forward with the Conservation District work, bring that forward, consult, and not want to sort of put some of the existing homeowners into more of a conundrum over some of the future of their properties. It's a fairly sensitive conversation as it's been, back and forth a few times, and we feel the provisions in the Conservation District will really provide the protection that's necessary once that comes forward. And we're relatively close, I think, all things considered, to the end of that process. So we'd like to go forward with it, finish that off. By the time we get through the other elements, I think we'll have the protections we need, although I can certainly appreciate the Heritage Board's consideration for maybe some additional protections in the interim.
So when would that, through you, Mr. Chair, when would that report then be expected back?
So we expect to have that finalized before council by this fall. So there's probably another round of consultation we'd want to do with the area residents. There's some technical work getting the final draft, but we are just finalizing the final version of the Conservation District right now.
Okay. Just in the interest of full disclosure, I own a home in the downtown, but not in that particular area. But I know that this is an area that is of great interest to the local residents. And so in continuing with the direction from past councils, I think it's important that new members of council are aware of what's happening. And we look forward to any information you provide going forward. Thank you.
So, sorry, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, we can provide a briefing note through the committee that might provide sort of an update on the current status of the project and perhaps some thoughts on the ICBL question that the Heritage Board tackled.
Okay. What direction you'd like to give, Councilor Vicente? Would that be a motion, City Clerk?
Through you, it probably wouldn't be, because a briefing note isn't part of the public record unless it gets added to an agenda.
Okay. So is that okay for you, Councilor Vicente?
From what I understand, looking here at the Heritage minutes, I believe that was, let me just find the exact wording, that staff would request to report back to the board on the potential for interim control bylaw to prevent future severances of properties within the proposed Main Street South Heritage Conservation District. If we need to add to that, this council look for a report from staff to consider other measures, including Heritage District designation. Is that correct?
So that'll be coming forward as part of the project. But I think in addition to that work going back to the Heritage Board, we can provide the briefing note to committee and council to just make sure everybody's got the same information in a timely way.
So, Mr. Cook, I'm not sure if the legal motion here is
Through you, Mr. Chair, probably not, because that second clause reflects, I think, what staff just advised, and whether it's a briefing note or a report back, it will address the Heritage Conservation District and other options as they exist.
So I believe that will satisfy members here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Vicente. No further questions or comments. Councilor Vicente moves the minutes of the Heritage Board. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We go on to now Councilor question period. Are there any questions? I see none. Public question period. Anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and ask any questions of committee? That's great. Nothing in closed session. Adjournment. Can I get a motion? Councilor Santos, move for April 8th. Is our next meeting at 7 p.m. A motion by Councilor Santos to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Yes.